Uh-huh. Okay. Good morning. So for today's topic, it's gonna be development of your urinary system. Some would say development of your excretory system. Okay, but if you know some of the excretory tissues will be the glands coming from your skin. So it's just gonna be development of the urinary system. So you already have my PDF file, my lecture file. You already know it's already loaded in the Moodle. And if you have questions later, you can just ask me. And in regards to the excretory system, so this will be the kidneys class and the ductal system associated with it. So what are your intended learning objectives? You should be able to know the embryological or the anlage of your urinary system class, and then the fate of your embryonic structures going from your mesoderm to the urogenital ridge to your urinary nephrostomes or your ridge, and then from the pronephros to the mesonephros, the metanephros, which will become the permanent kidney, which is your metanephros, and you just follow the alphabet from after S will be the T. So mesonephros is your interim kidney. The metanephros will be your permanent kidney. So you also have the positional changes of the kidneys from the pelvic area down to your T12 to L3, and then the urogenital sinus, which will form the bladder areas and part of the glands that you see in your gonadal system, and then some of the developmental anomalies associated with the embryology of your urinary system. So your urogenital system would consist of both the urinary, excretory, and your genital or your reproductive system. They are closely associated. They will come from one embryological origin class, mesoderm, particularly your intermediate mesoderm. So your intermediate mesoderm, if you follow the illustration, if you look at your PDF file, you're gonna see this illustration A, B, C, and D. That area there, the tubular structure is your neural tube, and you have there the notochord. The blue one there is your ectoderm, while the pink one there is your mesoderm class. So if you reviewed the mesoderm, you're going to have three parts of your mesoderm. You're going to have the paraaxial mesoderm, which is just near your notochord there and the neural tube. And if you look at the illustration here, that is the neural tube, that is the notochord, that is the paraaxial mesoderm, and that will form the somites. And this one will form the connective tissue of the back, which will be the bone, the muscle, the cartilage, and the dermis. Going laterally, next to your paraaxial mesoderm will be here your intermediate mesoderm, which will form your urogenital system, which will be your kidneys, your gonads, and your ducts. And finally, the last would be the lateral plate mesoderm, which will form the heart, the blood vessel, the blood cells, the body cavity lining, and your lymph bones class. So review these structures. You'll see them well in your slides. What you're gonna see will be your mesonephric tubules, glomerulus, and your indifferent gonads. Okay. So another illustration will show you that blue one there is your ectoderm class. Okay, then you have your paraaxial mesoderm, intermediate mesoderm, lateral plate mesoderm, dorsal aorta, and then you're gonna have the neural tube. Okay. So this one is your number 5 here is your intestinal tube. Now what happens to your urogenital ridge will be this one. You're gonna see these structures, this pronephros, the nephrotomes class, the pronephros, the mesonephros, and your metanephric area class, metanephros. And then this structure here The pink one is your indifferent gonads. Excuse me. And you will see them once you look at your slides where you're going to see your mesonephric glomerulus, your mesonephric tubules, and what lies medially will be your indifferent gonads. We go now to your urogenital ridge. So your intermediate mesoderm will form your urogenital ridge. Okay, the urinary part will become your nephrogenic cord, becoming the urinary system, while your genital or gonadal ridge will become your genital system. So both of these two will be coming from your intermediate mesoderm. So the urinary system will consist of these following organs. The main organ is your kidneys. They will be the one to exit the urine. And then afterwards, they will have to be transported to a storage area, which is the urinary bladder. And that tubule that will convey them will be your ureter. And finally, from the urinary bladder, if you want to void going to the exterior, you have to pass through the urethra. So we will be studying now the development of the kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and the urethra. So you have three sets of excretory organs or the kidneys developing in your human embryo. The first part, which is located in the cervical area, excuse me, and are non-functional, and they will become rudimentary. The second part here, going caudally, you're going to have your mesonephros, and they will develop and function briefly. That's why they are called your interim kidneys. And the last part here is your metanephros, and they will become the permanent kidneys. So the pronephros. The pronephros is up here, is up here, located in the cervical area there. If you look at your cervical somites, here is your urogenital ridge. The yellow one here is your digestive system. And if you follow down towards the distal part or the caudal part, your urogenital ridge is connected to your cloaca here. Okay, so that is the cloacal area. So your pronephros are transitory, non-functional. They will start to appear in the fourth week class. So they will develop at the cervical. They will completely regress by week 5. Excuse me. So your pronephros, they are vestigial. They are transitory. So that's the first. Next to develop at the latter part of your fourth week will be the mesonephros. And it is caudal or below your pronephros class. They will develop, they are well developed, and they will function briefly. Okay. So that's why they are called your interim kidneys until the permanent kidneys will develop. And what are your permanent kidneys? They are the metanephros. So your mesonephric kidneys will also consist of your glomeruli and your mesonephric tubules. And they will open into the cloacal area. So your mesonephros, they will degenerate towards the end of the first trimester. So after the first trimester, you're going to have just one, which will now be your metanephros. So going back to your mesonephros, they will develop and regress without making direct contributions to the definitive urinary system. So once it regresses, it doesn't contribute now to any of your permanent urinary system. However, the mesonephros will contribute to the genital system or gonadal system directly in the male and indirectly in the female. An example will be the mesonephric tubules becoming the efferent ductus of your testes. The mesonephric duct or your Wolffian duct will persist to form the ductus epididymis, the ductus deferens, the seminal vesicle, and the ejaculatory duct. We now go to your permanent kidneys or your metanephros. Remember, follow the alphabet S before the T. So mesonephros, interim, metanephros, permanent. So they will develop early in the fifth week while the pronephros is regressing and while your mesonephros is functioning. Okay? Because your metanephros will start to function at ninth week or 4 weeks later. So before they start to function, your mesonephros will be the one contributing to your kidney system, to the functioning kidney. Okay? So the metanephros will develop from two sources. So the metanephric diverticulum or duct, if you follow it here, coming from outpocketing in the distal portion of your mesonephric duct, will be your ureteric bud. I prefer to, we will be using the ureteric bud for this lecture. And the mass here, the black one here, the black one later, you'll see, will be the metanephric mass or your intermediate mesoderm or your metanephrogenic blastema or your metanephric tubule. I will be using your metanephric blastema during the lecture. Okay? So two sources, your ureteric bud and your metanephric blastema. So this is the illustration I was telling you a while back. The black one here is your metanephric blastema. The yellow one here is the bright yellow is your ureteric bud. The blue one here is your mesonephric duct. This dull yellow here will be your cloaca. And you see it is continuous with your allantois going into the umbilical area. And the hindgut here is your developing digestive system. So we go first to the ureteric bud. The ureteric bud will develop as an outgrowth, a tubular outgrowth from your terminal part of the mesonephric duct. And they will develop at day 28 class. So what happens to your ureteric bud? What will be the fate? The fate, it will become the ureter, the renal pelvis, the renal calyces, and the collecting tubules. So that will be the fate of your ureteric bud. And it will connect, to the metanephric blastema at day 32. So day 28, mesonephric duct, connect to the metanephric blastema, day 32. So the gene responsible for the production of your ureteric bud will be a transcription factor WT1 or Wilms tumor 1. And where is it expressed? It is expressed in your metanephric blastema. So you need your metanephric blastema to produce your ureteric bud class. The WT1 will regulate production of the GDNF or your glial-derived neurotrophic factor, which will induce and branch the ureteric bud to form your collecting tubules class. Okay, your ureter, your major and minor calyces. So the metanephric tubule is an elongation of the metanephric diverticulum, which will penetrate the metanephric blastema. Okay, so that metanephric tubule now is a penetration of your ureteric bud. And that metanephric plasma cell, after it is penetrated at day 32, will become what? The nephron class, which is the functional unit of your, which will include the functional unit of your kidney. And what are the parts of your nephron? They are your renal corpuscle, okay, which is the Bowman's capsule and the renal glomerulus, PCT, proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, and then DCT, your distal convoluted tubule. So reviewing, so the nephron will come from your metanephric tubule, from your metanephric blastema, while your ureteric bud will form the ureter, the renal pelvis, major minor calyces, and your collecting duct. Now, how did the metanephric tubule form? Okay. It came from your fibroblast growth factor 2 and your BMP7, which is produced by your ureteric bud. So it has to go hand in hand. Both has to be present to complete the kidneys class. Your ureteric bud, which will help in developing your metanephric plastema, while the metanephric plastema will produce your WT1, GDNF to induce and branch your ureteric blood. So both of these fibroblast growth factor 2 and your BMP7 will block apoptosis. So that is how the metanephros is formed. So your uriniferous tubule will consist of two embryologically different parts. Your nephron, derived from your metanephric blastema, and the collecting tubule derived from your ureteric bud class. So those are the two parts. Now, once it develops, the kidneys will be located embryologically in your S1. So they will lie in each other in the pelvis, ventral to the sacrum. So as the abdomen and the pelvis will grow, they have to move upward, okay, or ascend. And while they are ascending, they have to rotate medially at about 90 degrees. So the hilar area will be located medially. Initially, it will be ventral. As it rotate 90 degrees, it will now be positioned medially. So the adult position is achieved by the ninth week. And where is the adult position? At the level of the T12 to L3 class. The result of the ascension results from a disproportionate growth of the embryo caudal to the metanephros class. So the blood supply. So during ascent of the kidneys, the blood supply will come from the arteries at progressively higher level until the definitive renal arteries develop at L2 class, in which you will find the normal hilar area, L2. So the arteries will ascend. They are called your supernumerary arteries, which are end arteries. And if anything happens to those end arteries or any damage, it will result in the necrosis of your kidney parenchyma. So for quick gestation, kidneys will start to develop, okay, and that will be the pronephros. At ninth week, you're gonna have your first glomeruli to function. The bladder will be there. At 36 weeks, nephrogenesis will cease, okay, and you're gonna have about 1 million glomeruli in each kidney. Now, the increase in the size of the kidney after birth is secondary to enlargement of the glomerular diameter and the volume and the length increase class. Now, as this is developing, you may have congenital anomalies that will also occur, and you classify them accordingly. One, to the number, you may have no kidneys, or you may have more than two kidneys. Zero, one, two, more. Then position. You know that it is located in the pelvic area and has to ascend. If it is retained in the pelvic area, it is called your ectopic kidney class because the normal position would lie at T12 to L3. Fusion. If your kidneys will fuse, you're going to have a single kidney and you call them your horseshoe kidneys. Okay. But you still have a right and left, it is fused. And you may have a crescent fused ectopic kidney, which will be retained in the pelvic area or below the L3. Renal vasculature abnormalities. You may have more than one supply if it becomes more than one kidney. Abnormalities in structure. You may have lobulation, fetal lobulation. You may have pseudomasses. You may have congenital cystic changes. And you may have a nephroblastomatosis or a renal tumor. So those are your congenital anomalies of the kidneys and the ureters. Renal agenesis. Number. Agenesis will result when your ureteric bud fails to appear. And it will fail to appear when you do not have your metanephric plastima secreting those two factors, your WT1. And not only that, it may also be secondary to the absence of the bud, ureteric bud, which is if the bud itself did not form. So you have the absence of the source of origin. Okay. Unilateral is more common on the left if you have a unilateral kidney and predominantly in the male class. If you have complete renal agenesis, it is associated with oligohydramnios. And once that baby is delivered, it is incompatible with postnatal life. Eventually, the baby will die. So you have to have these two, your ureteric bud and metanephric plastima forming. Malrotation of the kidneys. Remember that the kidney is initially in the pelvic area and the hilar is located ventrally or anteriorly. So that is the embryonic position. If it fails to rotate, your hilar may persist in the anterior location. If if it over rotates, the hilar area now will be located posteriorly. And malrotation of the kidneys is usually associated with ectopic kidneys, failure of your kidneys to ascend to its normal position. So ectopic kidneys are kidneys located in an abnormal area below L3 class, okay, and have not rotated. So they're usually seen in the pelvic area. Number, your supernumerary kidneys will result from the development of two ureteric buds. If you look at this one has a hilar area and that is another hilar area. Okay? So you may have incomplete division of the ureteric bud. You have a kidney with a bifid ureter, or a complete division. You have double kidneys with a bifid ureter or separate ureters like this one. So these are your supernumerary kidneys. What happens if their kidneys fuse? You call them your horseshoe kidney. Okay? So they are a large U-shaped structure here, which usually lies in the hypogastrium. Why? Because normal ascension is not attained because it was prevented by a blood vessel, which is your inferior mesenteric artery. Okay. And they usually produce no symptoms, and usually they will be seen only as a incidental finding during ultrasound or abdominal scan. So here is an example of a unilateral pelvic kidney, okay, more on the left, niche. And this one is a horseshoe kidney. And you can see the structure here. So this is your dorsal aorta. You can see your inferior mesenteric artery there. This is a complete and partial global ureter. So your nephroblastoma, the most common renal malignancy in childhood is your Wilms tumor class. Excuse me. Most common primary tumor, typically due to a deletion of your tumor suppressor gene WT1, located on chromosome 11. So children with a large abdominal mass, the first or the initial diagnosis will usually be a Wilms tumor or a renal tumor. They are usually large, solitary, and well circumscribed mass. And they have to be removed immediately once diagnosed because these are malignant tumors class. So that is your kidneys, okay, and your ureters class. We now go downwards. So after reviewing your formation of your kidney and urinary system, we now go to the bladder area. So the bladder will come from a urogenital sinus. Where do you see your urogenital sinus? You will see them in the cloacal area. In the cloaca, it will be divided into two parts: a ventral urogenital sinus and a dorsal rectal area. This will be divided by your urorectal septum, which will appear on the fourth week and should have divided the cloaca by the seventh week class. So the urogenital sinus, once divided, will become three parts. The cranial part, which is the vesical part, the middle, which is the pelvic part, and the caudal, which is the cephalic part. Oh, phallic part, I'm sorry. What are the fate? The vesical part will become the urinary bladder. The pelvic part will become the urethra in the bladder neck, the prostatic urethra in the male, and the entire female urethra. So remember, the entire female urethra will come from the pelvic part of your urogenital sinus. What about the phallic part? The phallic part will become the genital tubercle class. So your urinary bladder comes from the vesical part of your urogenital sinus. Okay? So initially, if you look at the cloaca, you're gonna see your aladwa going to the umbilical area class. The bladder will be continuous with the allantois. So if you see a small smiling structure in your umbilical area, that will be the allantois. You will see them in your embryo slides. Uh, I think later. Okay. And this allantois, they will constrict to become the urachus. And finally, the urachus will become a fibrous tissue, which is represented by the median umbilical cord in adults class. Median, may medial. But remember, urachus median umbilical cord. So as the bladder will enlarge, the mesonephric duct, which connects to the cloaca, will be incorporated into the dorsal wall of the bladder, forming the trigon. In the males, the ureteric bud now terminates in the upper portion of the sinus, with the mesonephric duct, which is the vas deferens, opening into your prostatic sinus area class, to the general portion of the sinus, which is your prostatic urethra. Epithelium of the bladder will be derived from the endoderm of the vesical part of your urogenital sinus class. So what happens during the development? You may also have anomalies in the urachus. So if you have an enlarged portion in the urachal area, it's a remnant of the allantois. If it persists, you call them your urachal cyst, which is this one, illustration C. Now, if you have a connection, okay, but it ends in a blind pouch, you're going to have your urachal sinus there, which is illustration B. Now, if you see urine dribbling out of your umbilicus, then you're going to have a urachal fistula, meaning you have a direct connection of your urachus to the urinary bladder and to the outside of the body at the level of the umbilical area. So that is a urachal fistula, and you have to correct this surgically. How about in the rectum, in your rectal area? In the cloaca, if it did not divide the urogenital sinus and the rectal portion, you may have this fistula. Okay. In the male, it's going to be a recto-urethral fistula here. So your rectum will have a connection to the urethra and feces will come out of the male penis. But in the female, it's going to be a recto-vaginal fistula. Feces will come out of the vaginal opening, and this has to be corrected surgically. A more severe form of anomaly is your extropy of the bladder. Okay. In extropy of the bladder, you're going to have exposure and protrusion of the posterior wall of the bladder. This is more common in males. So your trigon and your ureteric orifices are exposed. So what happens? Urine will dribble intermittently. And this extrophy of the bladder is associated with musculoskeletal defect of the pelvic girdle and episphagia, which is an abnormal urethral opening in the penile shaft of in the males class, specifically the interior portion. We now go to your urethra. So what about the urethra? So epithelium of the most of the male urethra and all entire female urethra will be also derived from the endoderm of the urogenital sinus. So prostatic urethra, pelvic part, membranous urethra, pelvic part, spongy urethra, phallic part, but the terminal part will be derived from the surface ectoderm, which is the area of the fossa ventricularis or the opening, and that is lined by your stratified squamous non-cornified epithelium. That's why it's from the ectoderm. Now, the connective tissue and the smooth muscle of the urethra will come from your splanchnic mesoderm. Okay. Female urethra, all epithelium derived from the endoderm of the urogenital sinus. So this is an illustration how the urethra developed class. So once the urethra coming from the pelvic part of your urogenital sinus develop, now the endodermal portion, you may have outgrowths in the lower portion of your urogenital sinus. And these endodermal outgrowths in the female will become the urethral glands and paraurethral glands of skin, which is the homologue of the prostate gland in the male. While in the male, the lower portion of the urogenital sinus, the prostatic portion, prostate gland, the membranous portion, Cowper's gland, proximal part of the penile urethra, you're going to have your Litres gland class. Overview. Just a few more slides. Intermediate mesoderm will form your urogenital ridge. So out of the three mesoderm, only the intermediate mesoderm will form your urogenital system. So urogenital ridge, the urinary system, nephrogenic cord. So nephrogenic cord will become pronephros, mesonephros, metanephros. Well, the genital ridge will become the indifferent gonads class. So pronephros, non-functional, starts to develop at fourth week. Mesonephros will develop late in the fourth week. Okay. And will become your interim kidney. So you're gonna have your first excretory tubules and the first glomeruli there. They will degenerate except in male, which will contribute to the genital system class. Metanephros, permanent kidney, later in the fifth week, and will function at ninth week or 4 weeks later. So epithelium of the kidney and ducts, mesoderm. Epithelium of the urinary bladder urethra, endoderm. Two sources of your kidneys and ureters. So ang lagi, metanephric blastema, nephron. Ureteric bud, collecting system, ureter, renal pelvis, major minor calyces, collecting tubules. Okay. Bladder urethra formation, urorectal septum, develop fourth, should separate your cloaca by the seventh week. Completely separate by the seventh week. It will separate into the posterior anorectal canal and the anterior urogenital sinus. Upper part, urinary bladder. Pelvic part, male, prostatic and membranous urethra. Entire female urethra. Definitive of phallic part, your penile urethra, genital tubercle. So here, you have your pronephros, mesonephros, metanephric area, or metanephros, okay? And I think that will be the last slide. Tama-tama. So do you have any questions, class? Any questions? Questions?